The human mind is what makes our species so unique. Our ability to feel emotion, to think, deduce, derive, all comes down to the complexity of the brain's labyrinth of synapses. But oftentimes, what our brain tells us might not even reflect the reality. In this video, we'll delve into the darker sides of beliefs and gather just a few of the most notorious cults in history. Of note, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Cults are social gatherings where members share a common belief, and often, these beliefs can be quite out there. Number 5. Omu Shinrikyo, which means the Supreme Truth. It was a Japanese doomsday cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 2007. This cult is a mixture of Buddhist and Hindu beliefs, where apocalyptic Christian prophecies were also incorporated into their teachings. Their leader, Asahara, claimed to be both Christ and the first enlightened one since Buddha. Omu Shinrikyo is perhaps most infamous for its deadly attack carried out on the morning of March the 20th in 1995. Currently, 192 Omu members have been charged with the sarin attack carried out during rush hour in Tokyo, which killed 13 people and injured over 1,000 commuters. For those who don't know, sarin is a colorless and odorless chemical weapon which attacks the nervous system. Today, a number of the victims still suffer the aftermath of the attack, from complications like PTSD, blurred vision, and impaired speech. Asahara and 12 other Omu leaders have been sentenced to death. When Omu was demolished, former members reorganized into small spin-off groups. These smaller groups have attempted to change the cult's violent past into a more spiritual one. Number 4. Order of the Solar Temple. Founded in 1984 by Luke Juge, a doctor, and Joseph Di Mambro, a jeweler by trade. Juge was a lecturer who frequently went on tours giving lectures as a method of recruitment. This divided the group into 3 levels of memberships. Amanta, which consisted of people who were recruited by his lectures. The Arcadia clubs, which were those who wanted to take the teachings and beliefs further. And lastly, the International Chivalric Organization of the Solar Tradition, otherwise known as the Order of the Solar Temple. His lectures seemed pure and honest, titled Luke Juge, Physician, Love and Biology. But the content of the lectures were spiritual and actually discussed the apocalypse. The reason behind this was the group wanted to find more people strong enough to survive the ecological apocalypse which they believe was impending. Membership of the cult continued to rise in the late 1980s to around 500 members. There had been trouble brewing in the turn of the decade with members as they attempted to stockpile weapons, causing the order to receive bad press. As a result, members started to distance themselves from the group, both in attendance of meetings and financial contributions. When Tony Dutoit, a member of the Solar Temple, publicly spoke out against them, he, his wife, and child were murdered in their home. The 2 founders, Juge and Mambro, had disagreements over the direction of the Solar Temple, but one thing they both acknowledged was that they had to start preparing for the transit to another world, which resulted in a mass suicide, including the 2 leaders. On the 4th of October 1994, the remains of 53 members of the Order of the Solar Temple were found as the Swiss towns of Cherry and Granges-sur-Salvan noticed fires burning. Although termed as mass suicide, autopsy reports showed some victims had died of suffocation, while some others were given hypnotics then shot to death. Some had plastic bags over their heads, and some had shown signs of struggle. Very far from suicide. Also, the victims in Cherry were found lying in a star formation and had their hands clasped in prayer. Number 3. Matamoros Human Sacrifice. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, aka El Padrino, which translates to the Godfather, was the creator of this bloody cult. He was raised in a religious environment with his mother, 2 brothers, and a sister in West Miami. Constanzo's mother, Delia Aurora Gonzalez del Valle, was married at least 3 times, which essentially meant she raised her family alone. She practiced Santeria, a religion that formed when African slaves combined the worship of gods and spirits of ancestors with Catholicism. Santeria has over 100 million practitioners worldwide. However, Constanzo's mother practiced it in a malicious way where her neighbors reported that she would settle grudges by leaving headless animals on doorsteps. Whilst Constanzo had been practicing Santeria, he became engrossed in the rituals of Palo Mayombe, an Afro-Caribbean cult that stresses evil for evil's sake, whose leaders tend to be powerful drug lords using occult as a means of discipline. Constanzo's practices included aspects of voodoo, Satanism, and Santismo, but human sacrifice was a crucial part of his cult. How this cult was uncovered was from the capture of a 21-year-old pre-med student, Mark Kilroy, from the University of Texas. On the early morning of March 14th, 1989, Kilroy and his 3 friends were walking towards the bridge to the other side of the US border after a vacation in the Mexican town of Matamoros. Kilroy disappeared when his friend took a break from the walking. 4 weeks later, the first part of him was found, his brain boiled in blood over an open fire with a turtle shell, horseshoe, spinal column, and other human bones. The police had no lead to follow from the findings, but one of the gang members were caught when he ran a narcotics interception roadblock. They pursued him until he reached the ranch and found a revolver and some marijuana in the vehicle. The police showed the picture of Kilroy to the ranch owner and asked if he had seen anything. Sure enough, he was able to give the names of the other 3 gang members, thus the ranch owner was not charged of any crimes. The 4 men were interrogated for 36 hours until they finally talked. They were apparently ordered by Constanzo to pick up an Anglo Spring Breaker. They also revealed they lured drunken college students into their truck, tortured them, then ultimately sheared off the top of their head with a machete and boiled their brains. One of them said, "It was our religion or voodoo. We did it for success, we did it for protection." The police found evidence of a cauldron for black magic potions and bloody relics of ritual slayings. The rest of Kilroy's body was also found in a shallow grave with his heart ripped out. Dozens of lost bodies were also uncovered in graves around the ranch. The extent of the sacrificial killings are still unknown. There may be more in other sites, but speculations remains as speculations. Number 2. The family. Established by Charles Manson, who was raised by his single mother and had a turbulent childhood. Manson was in and out of detention for different crimes including stealing cars and hustling. When he was released at the age of 32, he had spent half of his life behind bars. In San Francisco, he had established himself as a messianic figure in the hippie culture. He eventually moved in with a Berkeley graduate student called Mary Brunner and soon after had 18 women living in the house with them. Here he shared his philosophies to this group, who soon became known as the Manson family. Dennis Wilson, the drummer of Beach Boys, often picked up hitchhiking members of the Manson family and brought them back to his house. After some time, Manson and his followers had taken over his house, where his followers acted like his servants, whilst Manson taught them his philosophies. The family moved into the Span Ranch in August 1968 after Wilson's manager had added to them. Here, Manson preached about the race war in the US, which would destroy the power structures of the country, leaving the family to rebuild it in their own philosophy. This apocalyptic war was known by the family as Helter Skelter. He also referred to the Book of Revelation of the New Testament. The ranch was eventually turned into an armed camp when Manson shot a black drug dealer to steal money because he was afraid that the man was a part of a gang called the Black Panthers. So he transformed the ranch with night patrols and armed guards. On July 25, 1969, Manson ordered Brunner and 2 other family members to go to the house of Gary Hinman, an acquaintance of his, to demand the $21,000 he had inherited. They did this by holding him hostage for 2 days before Manson arrived and ordered them to kill him. They drew the slogans of the Black Panthers to hide their identity. One of the family members was arrested when he was caught driving Hinman's car. 2 days later, Manson declared the time for the Helter Skelter race war. Manson ordered 4 members of the family to go to the house of Terry Melcher and to destroy everyone in it as gruesomely as possible. 4 people, including Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, were slaughtered. Disturbingly, they used Tate's blood to write the word pig on the front door of the house. They also murdered a young boy who was driving along the road as they approached the house. The night after, Manson, the same 4 members plus 2 other members, went out to another round of killings. Their next target was supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his wife Rosemary in Los Angeles. Both were stabbed multiple times, and they scrawled the words "Helter Skelter" on the wall in blood. Manson and the members of the family were arrested in December 1969. Trials began in June 1970 and received much attention from the media as the other Manson family members protested outside the courthouse with shaven heads marked with an X on their foreheads. Manson and 4 others were actually sentenced to death, but this was eventually changed to life in prison when the U.S. Supreme Court abolished capital punishment. Number 1. The Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. This doomsday cult was formed as a sect that broke away from the Roman Catholic Church in Uganda. Members had claimed to join the movement as a way to challenge the Catholic Church. The church at the time was ridden with scandals, and the terror of AIDS was causing believers' faith to waver. The cult focused on the word of Jesus Christ. The 10 Commandments formed the crux of their teachings. They strongly believed the apocalypse was coming in the coming of the new millennium. The cult began in the late 1980s as Ugandan Paulo Kashakun claimed to have visions of his deceased daughter who told him he would have visions of heaven. Although he did not have visions of heaven, he reported to have visions of Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, and Saint Joseph. Kashakun's other daughter, Credonia Merinde, a former prostitute, also reported seeing visions of the Virgin Mary. Although she failed to convince the Vatican, Kashakun instructed her to spread the word across the country. Joseph Kibwetire, a failed politician, believed Merinde fanatically, and together they formed a cult called the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. Kibwetire claimed to also have visions of the Virgin Mary, so the two set off to spread the word of the upcoming apocalypse. A new member, Dominic Kataribabo, an esteemed priest armed with a PhD from a US university, helped draw in new members to the group. The group soon expanded into a prosperous community in the early 1990s. Villagers described the believers to be disciplined, amiable, and not cause any trouble. The members were told to sell their property, including Kibwetire himself, who sold his property to buy a pineapple and banana plantation. The followers lived on this and until 1992, when the villagers' elders forced them to move to the Kanungu district, where they built homes, churches, and a primary school. Since the main teachings were from the Bible, particularly the 10 Commandments, members took this very seriously. They were discouraged to speak so that they don't break the 9th commandment, which is, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." So on some days, communication was by sign language. They also fasted regularly, with 1 meal eaten on Mondays and Fridays. Sex and the use of soap were also forbidden. Members had to rise at 3 a.m. and pray for 3 hours before beginning work in the fields. The followers had been dying of malnutrition and many were ill. In 1997, the group had approximately 5,000 members. As the new millennium closed in, the group leaders encouraged members to repent their sins and prepare for the inevitable apocalypse. All work stopped and members were instructed to sell their belongings cheaply. But as the year 2000 came and went with no signs of the end, members began questioning their leaders, ceased payments to the church, and some even demanded their money back. Merinde and Kibwetire then set a new date for the apocalypse as the 17th March 2000, where they planned a huge celebration for the coming end. Because of the revision of the predicted date, it led to some members doubting the leaders. This classed them as traitors who were then killed in waves before the 17th of March. Their bodies have been found in several mass graves. Those who were deemed too weak were also killed, but without being classed as a traitor. Now, on the 9th of the 15th, there was a party held in the new church where they reported to have consumed 3 bowls and an ample amount of Coca-Cola. The remaining members gathered the next night and prayed until the early morning. March 17th, 10:30 a.m., a huge explosion was heard by local villagers and a fire engulfed the newly built church with all the members of the movement still inside. 530 people, including children and allegedly the leaders, all perished in the flames. The windows and doors had been sealed. At the time, it is unknown whether this was a cult suicide or mass murder. Many other bodies emerged as the Ugandan police force searched the properties of those involved in the movement. On the 24th of March, 153 bodies were discovered in mass graves. 2 days later, another 155 bodies were uncovered. Weeks later, the police determined that this was a mass murder committed by the group leaders. When the doomsday prediction failed to come true, they murdered their followers while probably still making it seem like it's the end of the world. Thus, the police was led to believe that both Kibwetire and Mwerinde could still be alive, resulting in an international warrant for their arrest.